Hi there, welcome to another special video. This time we'll be taking a look at my emulated hard drive, which contains all my Amiga bits and pieces, which I rescued from a series of old Amiga hard drives that I used to have. And I remember my very first hard drive was an 80 megabyte Quantum, which cost me over £200. From there I moved on slowly all the way up to a 1 gig drive, and finally we moved on to the CDs. And when I got my Amiga 1200 I had two machines, one with a 1 gig drive and one with a tiny 5.5 inch internal drive which contained most of my stuff, and I used to shuffle things backwards and forwards between those. So I actually had a master and a slave network, two Amigas together, and so I could retrieve things on one and play things on the other. But those were the days. I don't have any Amiga hardware up to press right now, except for a few little bits and pieces. I certainly have the Amiga 500 case, which I've installed my PC into, and I also have the shielding as well, and the LED lights and the daughter board for the LEDs, which is now on my PC, and little bits and pieces like that. I even have the back plate from my Bodega Bay. But at the moment you can see we are moving through the introduction to this video, where I basically go through all my settings for WinUAE, or at least the one that was current at the time, and hopefully from these settings you should be able to get the average setup that I use, and you should be able to see my setup and emulate that. And yes, it is a shame that I'm using emulation, but that is for a number of reasons, and one of the reasons is it's very easy to rip from emulated games, and that was the main reason. Of course, the other main reason was I don't have the hardware to actually run these games, and even if I did, I'd be probably running ADFs rather than using discs, because of course disk drives and discs after all this time get a little bit run down. So I like my emulated setup. It's not perfect, but it's almost perfect, and it's certainly good enough. And apart from one or two small things, I think this is as good as the Amiga. And well, in most cases anyway, of course that does not replace the original boxes and the smell and the sound and the feel of the Amiga, of course. And for that I will always have the memories. But I hope to get a new Amiga at some point, and then I can introduce these games from real hardware. But up until this year I've actually been struggling for money, and the first part of last year I was absolutely completely broke. And being a freelance video editor, when the going's good it's great, but when it isn't good it's certainly not great. And sometimes I have to reduce my prices and work almost for charity in order to keep work flowing through the door. Since then I've actually worked on a Bollywood movie, and that really did not bring me much income, but that certainly did last a number of months. And I've worked on other things as well, most of which you won't even have a clue about, but private videos for YouTube and things like that. But that brings us onto the subject of money, and this video is actually part of the freebies included with my Kickstarter campaign. Anyone who donates to my Kickstarter will get this video, the full 50-minute version of that, without my interruptions layered all over the top of it. And we'll be cutting that short to round about a 20-minute video for this. And of course, if you want to see all this stuff and follow what I have to show on my hard drive, well, you can always mute the sound, mute this commentary, and play your favourite tracks in the background, and simply follow this as an audio visual cue. But for the moment, if you're happy to listen to my voice, we'll just go into the Kickstarter and the reasons behind that. From the very start of creating my Lemon Amiga play guides and reviews, it was decided that I would not get any money for that whatsoever, basically because it's charity work, and my favourite charity is keeping the Amiga alive. That's the most important thing, and that rules out everything else. So I did not go down the Patreon route, and I don't get $500 per video, unlike other video producers on the internet, I get nothing, even though it takes me a full week sometimes to create these videos, working on those for many hours and of course doing the research as well, and hopefully some of that research is correct enough to go into that video. And no script is created, I'm creating this ad lib. I simply talk about the game and I go through all the aspects of the game, and I have a few notes written down, the dates basically, and the authors and the coders of the games. But apart from that, all that time and effort which goes into the play guides is basically a one-job deal, and I do those for the love of the Amiga. But recently I actually created an article on the Lemon Amiga website chronicling the start of the Amiga from J Miner's point of view, and it was amazing the story of the Amiga that I uncovered during that journey. So I thought, wouldn't it be great finally for viewers of the Lemon Amiga channel to uncover the full story of the Amiga, right from the humble beginnings when Jay was working on ships in the North Atlantic during the war, all the way through to creating the Atari machines that he created, and of course moved on from Atari and made his own company known as High Toro, and that was renamed later on Amiga Inc. And from there he created all the breadboards necessary to create the Amiga, and I found out that Atari actually gave them a massive check to keep the Amiga alive, and that led Atari to get their hands on the blueprints to the Amiga, and that led to the Atari ST, which is the first actual unofficial Amiga clone. And I didn't realise at the time that I had an Amiga, that the ST was basically Amiga rebranded, and yes, there were a few chips missing from the blueprint designs which the Commodore crew actually took on and created to finish off the Amiga. And when Jack Tra-mell left Commodore, he went over to Atari and got those plans. But I think the story of that actual takeover is fascinating, and after that of course they went on to create the Ranger project, and anyone who doesn't know about the Ranger project, well, yet again it needs a documentary to explain all that. And of course there were many revisions of the Amiga which never saw the light of day, which I thought people may be interested in. The Amiga 3800, the Amiga 2200, the Amiga 300, and little bits of revisions and half revisions and things like that. So there were actually 45 Amigas which were produced but not necessarily released to the public, and so I thought it would be great to go through all of those. And the Amiga was also used in arcade boards as well, so it would be great to go through all those arcade machines which were actually run by Amiga, such as Mad Dog McCree, and it was great that those actually had the Amiga motherboard inside those. And so the idea from the Kickstarter took shape to actually create a chronological history of the Amiga and to note all the things that went wrong along the way, which actually led up to its demise in the end. And there are 15 main reasons why the Amiga failed, and I will love to go through all those 15 reasons in a documentary review, because those do take some time to explain, and we do need to take a look at the actions of the Commodore crew, particularly Mehdi Ali, and we'll also look at all the people that tried to bail Commodore out and the Amiga out over the years, and of course the guys that took it on from there. And the Amiga was not dead for a long time, but due to sabotage it was eventually killed off, and Bill Gates had a hand in that. And so you will hear some stories about Bill Gates as well, and I think it would be great to actually recognise all the people that were involved in the Amiga and to recognise what they did. And this, unlike the Viva Amiga crew, isn't going to be talking heads on the engineer's side, talking about how they engineered the Amiga, and unlike the Amiga years, this is going to be software side people talking about how they created the games in the software industry. Now, this is definitely a fan's point of view, and the amazing rake of games on the Amiga, which you can actually see on the screen. I have a few of those installed right now, and they were amazing. It would be great to go through the top 100 games, which are famous for being Amiga titles. 100 top Amiga games, absolute classics. Every single one of those is not hard, and I actually created a list of top Amiga games for the Amiga crew over in California last year when they did the Amiga 30 at California. And from there I thought it would be great to actually create a video and release all those 100, not necessarily in any kind of order, just to show the vast range of the Amiga, and also to go into all the little bits that the Amiga could do as well, which all added up to a whole lot, including the music creation and the animation creation, the ray tracing on Lightwave, and creating art packages and drawing pictures and things like that. But the Amiga was very versatile, all added up together. It was actually one of the pioneers of broadcasting in America, and most of the US companies which offered cable networks actually used the Amiga. So most cables ran using the Amiga for a time in America, and that really took off in America, and now of course cable is everywhere. But if it wasn't for the Amiga, we wouldn't have had that. And of course, how many movies used the Amiga? Well, you may be surprised to know that the Terminator from the Terminator 1 film, when that thing appears in the fire after it's just been exploded out of the big rig, the Terminator walks through his fire completely unclothed, and that shot was actually created on the Amiga. And from there are many movies that actually created shots with the Amiga, and TV programs just like Quantum Leap, that actual effect, which I always wondered what that actually came from, that was created using the Amiga. So if it wasn't for the Amiga, many sci-fi TV programs wouldn't even exist, and of course Sequest DSV and the Robocop series on TV, but also other things as well. So it's interesting to go through all the things that were created on the Amiga, not just the web channels and the weather channels, but also the TV programs as well, and it will be great to list those in a documentary to chronicle the Amiga, and also go through that from a fan's point of view. Also looking at the Amiga magazines, of course, and checking out the scene, and from magazines we can also gain interviews, and interviews will not be, unfortunately, in the documentary. It will be me talking about the Amiga from start to end. Would that take some time? Yes, that would take an incredible amount of time, and I've no idea how long that would take to voice that all the way through. This is simply an introduction, and it's also going on for 19 minutes. So in the full documentary, you can imagine that goes on for hours. Now, I'm not going to raise 125,000 for this, not like the Amiga years. No, I'm probably not even going to raise 35,000 like Viva Amiga. The idea behind the Kickstarter is simply to raise funds for all the endless photographs that I'm going to have to license to fill out all those hours, and I've already started taking motherboard designs and things like that from the internet, so I have a good stock of images, but I'm certainly going to need more to fill out the story of the Amiga. And of course I won't be relying on talking heads and clips from advertisements and things like that. Hopefully we'll be finding those, and that will cost some money. So I thought, well, the minimum that's going to cost is £1,000 in this case, and if fans are really interested in this, then we'll have a normal amount of 5,000, and we'll have a series of stretch goals. I figured that if I have 300 regulars watching my channel, then if each one of those gave me a tenner, then that would be 3,000 in the bag. Unfortunately, progress has been slow on the Kickstarter front, and if it wasn't for one guy contributing 350 in one go, well, that Kickstarter campaign would have been a flop. But with 2 weeks to go now before this runs out, I'm giving it one last throw of that dice to explain what it is all about, and of course introducing this freebie that you'll get along with the making of Batman the movie and the free things that you've seen already, like the cartoon intro. And I've also added a few things like a Swiv play on one token, and a ride around stunt car racer and F1 GP tracks and all the freebies like that. So you will get something for your money, even if you throw a $5 in there, and the $5 is certainly great. At this point, if we don't reach that 1,000 minimum barrier, then we'll end up with nothing. So I don't really want to end up with nothing after all this, but that's entirely possible. So basically I'm on my knees pleading at this point that somewhere, somehow, a few of those guys, now that it's after Christmas, will have a bit of spare cash just to throw into that. And that's one of the reasons why this Kickstarter extends into the middle of January. So basically I hope that you'll allow me to make that documentary, and maybe we can get that voiced over by a professional, but it's probably going to be me that's doing it, because really, unless I get Dave Haney to do it, which actually has crossed my mind to offer to get Dave to do it, then it's probably going to be me and a series of pictures and games footage and things that I've ripped off the Amiga. So it will be an interesting journey, but definitely a fan's journey. And if this Kickstarter does not go through, at the end of the day, I have even considered doing the whole thing as a podcast. And then, of course, as a podcast, it only needs the audio. I have edited an audiobook already, and that did take 6 months, and I'm very prepared to wait 6 months and edit that and to get that out there. But of course, this being an audio-visual channel, it would be great to have the visuals to go along with that. So it is not necessarily a complete write-off if we don't get the funding, and of course £1,000 is a drop in the ocean compared to many Kickstarters, but to me it means everything. And I don't really go for funding. I can't get any funding if I'm tied in with the Lemon Amiga outfit, because of course the Lemon Amiga website is yet again a freebie, and that's run by fans for fans. So I don't really want to go down that route, but of course, well, I don't really want to milk the Kickstarter either. I don't really want loads and loads of money to do this. I simply want the story of the Amiga to be out there. And you may have read that in books and things like that, but maybe an audio-visual presentation will be so much better. You never know. So if you can help me with that, you'll get this video and other videos like it, and maybe I'll produce special videos as well for backers if we get so many more backers. But at the moment I'm simply doing this simply to get some more interest in that Kickstarter, and if you are interested, then please don't hold back. Donate now, pledge, and if we don't reach that target, then nobody, even anybody, will lose any money, because if we don't make it, then we don't make it. So that's the end of this blurb. Basically, we've gone through the tour and we've missed out some bits. There is another 30 minutes of the tour that you get by contributing to the Kickstarter. But for the moment, I'm showing Sega Sonic is actually possible to run on the Amiga, even though this is the Sega Master System version and not the Sega Mega Drive. We don't find too many enemies there, and we don't find many of the extras like parallax scrolling, things like that. But you can see it was perfectly possible to do this on the Amiga, and of course Mr. Beanbag produced this kind of quality graphics, and the Doodlebug did create the Sonic type character turning around in somersaults, so it was possible to combine these graphics and that kind of playability. But they said it wasn't possible at the time, and I actually believed that for quite some time. But the game is certainly possible, and it's certainly possible to raise $1,000, because we only need to raise another 450 to get there. So thank you for watching this freebie video, and I hope to see you soon on another Lemon Amiga play guide at some point in the future. So it was possible, let's make it possible. The Amiga makes everything possible. So thank you.